welcome all of you to this session. I see there are still people arriving in the room. I'm Ása Ríkharðsdóttir. I'm the Secretary General of ITM, and I will be your moderator of today. Welcome to this shift meeting on Me Too in the culture sector, from call out to structural change. For those of you who do not know, SHIFT is a joint project of 9 culture networks funded by Erasmus+. We have been working together since late 2019 on 4 large topics, with the aim to provide training and new skills for network team members on those topics, create new knowledge and competence to forge change where needed, and share knowledge gained through the project. We are now coming towards the end of it, and it's time to share our findings with the broader culture sector. Today, it is about our topic, gender and power relations, and more specifically, sexual harassment and power abuse in the European art world. Just a few house rules. Note that this session is being recorded. Please stay muted unless you are speaking. We will have space for questions and remarks later in the session. But if you have general points, ideas, or information you would like to share with all of us, feel free to do that in the chat anytime you want. And if you need captions, you see the button Live Transcript on the bottom of the screen. And if you click on that, it will lead you to the transcript. This session is the first of 2 where we will be sharing our findings on the gender and power relations topic. We are today sharing 3 major takeaways, which you will find in the link in the chat for you to read, in advance of our final report on this huge subject. This report will be presented at the ITM plenary in Lyon in France on the 22nd of October and made public on that same day. And by hosting this frontrunner session today, we invite you, the participants, to contribute as well as share valuable points by email until the end of the week, which could enrich our final report. So this is an invitation for you to contribute towards the final stage. And with that being said, I'm happy to introduce to you the 2 main researchers who will be walking with you through the key takeaways, and later we will have contributors with whom we have been interviewing in the research, and they will be sharing stories for change and lessons to learn from. And first, I give you Marta Keil, who is a performing arts curator and researcher based between Utrecht and Warsaw. Her curatorial research and practice focuses on alternative processes of institutioning and redefining modes of working transnationally. Since 2019, she has been co-running Performing Arts Institute in Warsaw, an independent organization that aims at developing the independent performing arts field in Poland. And with Marta, the main key researcher of our project has been Marie Lesourd, who since 2012 has been the Secretary General of On the Move, the Cultural Mobility Information Network active in Europe and worldwide. And prior to this position, Marie worked in Singapore for the Asia Europe Foundation and directed the French Culture Center in Indonesia. Marie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ása, for this introduction, and I will also have an introduction particularly to this first findings, this first takeaway of the final report that we will present in 2 weeks in Lyon during the ITM plenary session. So before Marta delves more into the first two takeaways, I would also like to maybe give in introduction some information about our approach, perspective and methodology, because indeed the subject of sexual harassment and power abuse in the art sector is really huge, and a lot of documents in a way have been produced on the subject to a certain extent. So our objective is neither to be fully comprehensive on the subject, nor to duplicate what is already existing. So I would say that we have two main focus. One is to basically try to shift the focus from individual cases to more collective one that can contribute to structural change, that can also be more context specific. Because we would like very much in this report to take into consideration existing socio-political differences which exist in Europe in relation with the issue. And the second focus that we take in this report and already in this first takeaway is also to try as much as possible to provide solution-oriented strategy. Of course, for the European Cultural Network, which are part of the SHIFT project, but also to go beyond. And here we also take into consideration that this transnational cross-border perspective is both a challenge, but also a key opportunity to deal with the subject. To deal with this research and this report and this first takeaway, as usual, I would say in some European project, our time frame was a bit short. So we had basically like 3 months to work on it, particularly since June 2021. And we decided in collaboration, of course, with IETM, but also with our SHIFT partner, to base this publication on 3 main sources of information. So first of all, existing material, existing, for instance, code of conduct legislation, also existing research and document. As I say at the beginning, there are quite a substantial number of documents on it. And last but not least, we also decided to conduct interview with professionals from the field. And this interviewed, and we reached 23 interviewed people. The professionals that we interviewed were mostly also recommended by the SHIFT partner, so the European Cultural Network. The interview has been also framed to try to identify what we call story of change, be them positive, negative, still very much challenging, but we try to really focus on cases that have been particularly recently tackled since the beginning of the Me Too movement, and that try also to instigate a broader structure process of change in a given context. And we will come back also on this question of contextualization of this question. So now, without further ado, I will pass the word to my colleague Marta, that will delve and share the first 2 takeaways of this report. Marta?
Thank you so much, Marie. Thank you for describing the context of our research, and thank you, Auza, for the introduction. Maybe I could indeed try to walk you all through indeed the first 2 takeaways. We identified 3 of them, and I think we are at this very moment still in front of shaping the final, not even conclusion, but rather the final questions we want to ask within the sector. So what you're gonna listen to are mostly the takeaways, or first thoughts and first main observations that we would like to share with you as hopefully instigators for the future discussion. First of the observation that was kind of prevailing during our research was the realization that actually the Me Too movement in Europe is very far from being homogeneous at any layer. And definitely the Me Too movement showed, I guess, us all that there is a kind of, let's say, common layer, which is that the vulnerability and the lack of really strong effective protection touches kind of everywhere, no matter where we are working, no matter what's the kind of power abuse, what kind of sexual harassment we might experience, what is our age, experience, class, and gender. But having that in mind, we realized how big the discrepancies between the countries and geopolitical context we operate within are, and how important they are, how influential they are in the way how we might address the question of sexual harassment and power abuse. And probably a good example is only to observe the pace with which the Me Too movement unfolded in Europe. For instance, this year, since January 2021, we've been observing a kind of Me Too wave, if you like, in the performing arts sector in Croatia, in Greece, in Poland, in Slovenia, and recently in Czech Republic. And it was like this half a year of cases being made public, and an in-depth discussion about how to address them, as well as really important changes and procedures that have been negotiated, introduced, put in practice, sometimes reassessed during this half a year. While we could have observed that during last 2-3 years, since basically 2017, when the global Me Too movement started, and then 2018, the discussion has been present in the performing arts sector, for instance, in Belgium or in Iceland or in Sweden. And that again shows us maybe not necessarily that Europe is divided through this or that axis. That's not the point. I guess what that discrepancy in pace of unfolding of the Me Too wave shows us is that the way of addressing the sexual harassment and power abuse was always embedded and very much depends on the context in which we operate. By which I mean, for instance, the way how the work on gender equality or the women's rights are being discussed, and what kind of a position do they have in the public debate. And a good example is definitely the country I come from, Poland, where the Me Too movement kind of intertwined with a very strong backlash against the women's rights. And that was a very interesting observation that goes beyond studying the particular cases. I think it's also a very interesting observation when it comes to analyzing the cultural context and the work culture on a very large scale. The way also how we define the position of the artist, how we address the notion of the master, how we address the notion of a collective work, of art as a collective effort, and so on and so forth. And therefore, well, going through the already existing materials and quite substantive number of already existing code of conducts, procedures, methodologies, we realized that a lot of them are relating to the so-called Western part of Europe, if you like. And therefore, we decided to try to counterbalance that situation. And close to 40% of our interviews out of the 23 that Marie mentioned were conducted with the professionals coming from the Central and Eastern European countries to also understand better how the situation unfolds in that particular region and what's the context of the discussion at the moment. And the other takeaway we would like to touch today is it also actually relates very much with the pace of the Me Too wave, but this time we want to focus on the pace of change and on the time, how time sensitive the process of change and transformation is, meaning that very often, this is the observation that came from most of the interviews, very often the change, especially when it is planned as a structural, in-depth change in a given organization or institution, very often it takes much more time than planned, and the results cannot be expected very soon. And this time, the process of change is very time-consuming, and therefore can become really exhaustive for the ones who take part in it. And therefore, I guess the focus on time could be really interesting also, while realizing that the clear procedures, clear definitions, clear methods that help to address the cases of sexual harassment or power abuse or any kind of transgressive behavior, they are definitely key, but they need time to be put into practice. And they need time also to be reassessed. It's like to put them in practice often means to constantly reassess them and constantly evaluate them. And therefore, the process usually becomes much more demanding than it seemed to. And in many cases, during many of the interviews, our interlocutors addressed the problem of an exhaustion. And we realized that, for instance, as a kind of support from external professionals, be it psychologists, be it legal advisors, intimacy coordinators, ombudspersons, could be really needed, not only to help the ones who are already introducing the change and introducing the structural transformation in their own organizations, but also in order to provide the further cases to happen elsewhere, also to provide or enlarge the public debate around it. And I guess the very, very last point related to that issue is that it seems from the interviews taken that it's really key, it's really crucial to think of the work on the gender equality as a core of the work of a given institution or organization, not as another box to be ticked. That's one thing, but to think about it as equal to, for instance, artistic work or to any other, let's say, direction or chunk of work that the institution has to do. And while thinking of the gender equality as being centered, as one of the core activities, it seems that the whole dynamic of the change and the whole dynamic of the discussion is being transformed. That will be it at the moment when it comes to the second takeaway. So I give it over to Marie.
Thank you, Marta. And so I will introduce a little bit the third takeaway, even though I would say also like all are also interlinked. And this third takeaway is already in a way already in the document that maybe some of you saw and which is also shared in the chat, is already taking the shape of a form of a set of recommendations that will be further fine-tuned and rich and detailed in the final report. And more than ever through this research project, we strongly believe that stronger transnational cooperation, also more human-based, I would say people-to-people based, can help the European art sector as a whole to address and combat sexual harassment and power abuse. So on one side, we are very much fully aware that a kind of copy-paste approach of methodology, code of conduct, legislation cannot really work at a European level. However, through our reading and also through many of the feedback of the interviewed professional, we got this idea that there should be a form of database or a place that connects also like existing database or documentation related to code of conduct, legal solution, methodology, and approach, and also stories that could be inspirational from one context to the other. And in this regard, I also would like here just to mention, we are working on this report, but part also of this project. Another network coordinator, part of the SHIFT project, Johan Flock from FACE, Fresh Art Coalition Europe, is also working on a document which is called an annotated bibliography, which will list and which will be also online and which will list like policies, campaign, code of conducts in different European countries and also internationally. So it could be also part of the step to facilitate access to information, access to resource. As part of also on this importance of this transnational solidarity, there will be, like, I would say, like two sets of ideas. One would be more related to how transnational solution could also better protect freelancers working across border. As we all know, I mean, our sector is also very much composed of freelancers, and many of them are also working across border transnationally. So here, one of the recommendations would be like also how to protect them better, and also in closer consultation with trade unions and federations working on the issue. Another idea that was also mentioned, and that could be part of a set of recommendation, would be also to see some form of external international pressure that can be effective in some case. For instance, a rule that could be applied at EU level that European or that organization or institution will get only some form of funding if they comply also, or if they have in place some form of code of conduct and code of ethics. We see some form of experimentation, you know, on these matters going on at a national level, which could be also interesting reference. And last, to finish also on this question of this importance of transnational solidarity, would be more related to the role of the network. So to the role that we should all play also at the level of the network. Definitely, as far as some recommendation could be highlighted, is how European and transnational cultural network could provide on a much more regular basis a safe space for discussion, meetings, training, workshop, and also be the place for advocacy campaign when needed, when relevant as well. And last but not least, an interesting idea that came up from different interviewed professional would be also to have again, to work on this regularity, on this process of action, would be to have a regular common retreat gathering artists, cultural professional, expert or activists, not only from the arts and cultural sector, but also from the other sector, in order to assess change, provide ways for future action that would also include all forms of sexual harassments, no matter the gender identification is. So I guess this last point, this takeaway, which is more taking the shape of this recommendation towards a European cultural network and what we can do, part of the SHIFT project and beyond as well, will be also part of the discussion later that is further moderated by Auza. And I am passing back the word to you, Auza. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marie and Marta. A lot of food for thought for all of us here to think about. Before we continue, I'd like to invite you all to please start thinking of the things you would like to say to all of us today, or if you have a remark you would like to put in the chat, please do so as well. But if you would like to speak later on, please write your name and organization in the chat, and then we will give the word to you once it's your turn. But before I give the word to you all, I would like to introduce to you our prepared contributor of today, who is Žmak, who is a dramaturg, writer, screenwriter, assistant professor at the Academy of Dramatic Art at the University of Zagreb. She recently started working as a student support coordinator at the Academy, and she is one of the instigators of a process behind revising the teaching methods of ADU. And she also launched an information campaign, which is called "We Didn't Ask for This." Žmak is one of the people that was interviewed for the research that will be made public later on in October, and we thought it would be an interesting thing for you to hear her story and experience. Please, Žmak, welcome.
Hi, hello everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. So I'm Jasna. I come from the University of Zagreb and the Academy of Dramatic Art. So our experience at the Academy is obviously a bit different than maybe some of the other artistic institutions, but I think academies as places where most of art professionals gain their knowledge and prepare for their future careers are actually super important for this topic. I feel that some of the things I'm going to talk about were already said, but nonetheless, I want to share with you our experience at the Academy. As Marta already said, that our part of the world was a bit late with the Me Too movement, so it only started this year with a few actresses from Serbia actually making a public announcement, and then it was really a wave which transferred to all the other countries. And the name that Ausa mentioned, we didn't ask for it, is actually that was the name of a Facebook page. So Facebook was unfortunately the platform where everything started, which was called I Didn't Ask for It, where people posted their anonymous experiences. And some of these statuses were referred to some of the professors at our academy. So our dean at the time decided to immediately actually take action. And we were one of the few institutions in Croatia, not only in the art field or in the educational field, but in general, that decided to like immediately open up this topic. And we did it in two ways. So the first thing that we did, that we opened up a channel for student complaints and a body that handled these complaints. We got altogether 33 complaints, some of them dating even like 20 years back. So you can see how heavy this topic has been. And we were a lot, our academy was a lot in the media, so there was a big spotlight on the academy. Some said it was bad press. We believe it was good press because we decided to speak openly about our problems. This process of handling these complaints was, as you can imagine, very complex. It was very time and energy consuming because none of us, this body who was handling this was made up out of professors, and we had no skills and no resources needed for handling such a delicate process, because it was mainly professors talking to their colleagues, right, to other professors. So we were all very much learning by doing, without any support from our master university, which still pretends that none of this has happened. So we were like this one drop in the university sea that together with maybe 2 or 3 other university faculties that decided to work on this topic. But apart from this process of handling complaints, we have also initiated a bigger campaign, which was called We Didn't Ask for It, by which we basically decided to bring this theme into the public sphere of the academies in various ways. So first, we organized a month-long program of roundtables, lectures, educational seminars, and a small artistic program devoted to the theme of gender equality and sexual harassment. After that, we created also a visual campaign, putting up posters in the space of the academy with some problematic sentences, which professors sometimes, say, like, what are you doing after class? Or I didn't mean it like that, and stuff like this, just to bring awareness to both professors and students that maybe, although these sentences sound naive, maybe they're not so naive. We have also launched a website where all the relevant information about this topic is available, where students can go and see how to proceed if they have a problem, where there is a list of resources. There's also a timeline with like all the important things that happen as part of this process. We have also started making a sexual misconduct policy, which will be open for comments from both professors and students before it gets launched. And although the most common question when I was my friends and colleagues knew that I was involved in this Me Too at the academy, and the most common question I would get would be, is anyone getting fired? And then followed by the comment, if no one gets fired, then it was all in vain. And also at the beginning of this process, I was very much on the same page, aligned with this position. But now, quite some months into this, I have to say that I'm very much convinced that like sanctioning is not the, I mean, I understand this position because there is a lot of anger for these years of, you know, being silent, but I think sanctioning is not the only way, but prevention and awareness are like the key points, because if we do a good job about prevention and awareness, then there will be no need for sanctioning, which sounds utopistic, but you get the point. And I know that like these two words are very much worn out, and you know, they can become just little flags, you know, oh yeah, we are doing, you know, awareness and so on. But I also know from my experience that if institutions take this thing seriously, then these words can really have an impact. So what, like looking back at how we arrange this, how we handle this topic, I would say that like it's a twofold process. So first of all, it's opening spaces for discussing this topic, like we are doing here today, like bringing it into the public sphere, into the media, and so on. And I think it's one aspect of the story which often gets neglected, and people think it's just, you know, talk. But if I compare, for example, my student experience when I was at the academy, when no one was talking about it, pretending it does not exist, I think it's a huge step and a very important message to our students, you know, okay, we are talking about it. And not hiding things under the rug. And the other thing is definitely like create protocols and procedures for dealing with these themes in an institutional way. And for example, this means creating opportunities for educating both students and teachers, creating formal bodies for handling complaints, creating points for obtaining information, opening counseling offices, opening up the curriculum for these kind of themes, which I think is super important and super hard, because it's every faculty is part of a bigger system. So it's, yeah, this is the I think the most important key, but also the hardest one. And also not to mention that none of this work ever gets valorized. So we do it as teacher, but it's not part of our workload or recognized or valued as this. And I know that this kind of like institutionalizing human interaction is very tricky, and I think it needs a lot of subtlety, and also like it needs paying attention to the context. I think Marta and Marie mentioned this word a lot of times, and I think it's super important because it's not the same. The society does not look the same, and this team does not look the same in different countries. So I think we managed in our case to really somehow adapt things to our context. But like although we have started doing some changes, I think we still have a long way to go, obviously. It's also a very generational thing, I would say. So I think it will like newer generations, it will take time for them to, you know, absorb some of these things, and for the older generations, I'm not sure it will happen, but okay. But like the common thing that I think what we need for the structural change, like that's the main question of this research and of this meeting, I would say it's knowledge. Like gaining knowledge. And it might sound paradoxical, like that a higher institution, higher education institution, which is a place where knowledge is being produced, needs like more knowledge, but it's a different kind of knowledge, which is usually not perceived as important knowledge. And it's basically knowledge on how to handle complex human processes of this kind, knowledge on how to create safe spaces, knowledge on about the impact power relations have in the classroom, and so on. So that's like a whole other set which is not present anywhere in our curricula or programs. And when I think about how to gain this knowledge, I would go very materialistic and say resources, meaning both financial and time resources, which has also been mentioned, because I listed a few things that I think that we would need. We have I don't know how to use it, the word in English, but a few things that would facilitate our process much better if we had them. for example, money and time for the kind of research that Maria and Marta have done now, like we don't have it. I mean, it's very hard to obtain that kind of financial resources, time resources, and also like skills wise, in order to better understand where we stand as a community, as a educational institution, and so on. Then also money for external advisors in the fields of, for example, law and psychology, also something that has already been mentioned. We didn't have, we desperately needed these things, but it all came down to social connections. And, you know, our dean had a friend who is a lawyer, so she jumped in to help us, things like that, right? Then again, money and space for educating both students and professors. We had a really good collaboration with an NGO dealing with women's rights, and again next week we have an introductory lecture for our freshman students about the theme of sexual harassment. So luckily it's not too expensive, so we can do it. But you know, these things cost money, and we steal from other things in order to transfer money to there, because we don't have money provisioned for that. And then again, money and space for exchanging experiences, ideas, and tools with other institutions, something that has also so far happened accidentally. For example, I had a TV appearance where there was a professor from Serbia who mentioned their faculty has a misconduct policy, and then I got in touch with her, so she sent me their version, and that was the basis where we started working on. So it was completely accidental, because there was no, you know, reference where to go and search for things like this, or at least we didn't know about it. And so this is this.
Jasna.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, if you want to sum up, but
yeah. I just have one more sentence. I would say that I guess everyone who has ever worked in an institution knows that they're very hard to change. They're very stubborn and inflexible, but institutions are also made out of people. And that's like, I think with people with knowledge, then we can really do changes. That's my final thought.
Thank you so much, Jasna. You shared with us a lot of experience in a very short time. Thank you so much for doing this. And I think it's important for the whole group to know that one of the things that we realized when we started digging into whom we should research and whom we should interview, several of the innovative examples and several of the newest examples where we've been trying to forge stories for change have been happening in arts universities across Europe. So you will find in our final report several examples of that. But without further ado, I think it's time for us to share with all of us. And I already have two people that have asked for the word. And for those of you that still would like to say something, again, put your name and organization in the chat, and we will tell you when it's your turn. I will be a little strict on time, because I would like to invite as many contributions as possible. So please be aware of that when you speak, and you will see me waving my pen or doing something when I think you've spoken enough and somebody else needs to come. But first up is Jane Daly from the Irish Theatre Institute, who would like to tell us about a new report that they are about to launch, I believe.
Hello, thank you, Elsa. My name's Jane Daly from the Irish Theatre Institute, and we're an organisation in Ireland that have been leading out on a project around dignity in the arts workplace called Speak Up. On the 19th of October, we will be publishing a report, which are the findings of a survey, a cross art form survey, that was completed, it involved 1,300 participants. And from this, we are making a set of recommendations. And I'm very encouraged by the descriptions of the work that Maria and Marta have given us in terms of their methodology, which is very similar to ours. The importance of avoiding duplication and trying to be solution orientated. And also to recognize that culture change takes time, and practical interventions sometimes can be done immediately. But the thing that is most important from hearing what you're saying is the value in transnational engagement and collaboration, and how we can share and learn from each other and support each other, because this is a societal issue. Our report crosses the spectrum of harmful behavior, from bullying through to victimization, humiliation, harassment, sexual harassment, and sexual assault. So we're very much working in the same area. And I want to bring your attention to the publication of this on the 19th. Hope we can share it with you and possibly speak further together and share information. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Jane. I hope I promise you that we will share it with this group. And it's very important for us to know about new research that is coming out now, because this is not the end. This is the beginning of something for us cultural networks, as well as the sector, I believe, at large. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Next up, sorry if I mispronounce your name, Ildiko Sirato from Budapest.
Yes, thank you very much, and I'm happy to see you all, and I was very happy with your report and material, because I find it's very important and actual today, not only I mean only in European context, but I think it's really a big question of society, of our societies, and I think that there are not only kind of legal or policy questions in the background of harassment and victimization and power abuse, but the causes are leaning deeper. I mean, and you were right about solidarity and about this cultural and societal diversity in Europe, and I think it's very important to kind of see the questions from that point too, that European societies are quite different, and not only the angle of West and East, but I think there is quite big differentiation of heritage, cultural and societal heritage. How community could deal with different problems and questions, and it's kind of again a cultural question. I mean, and not only political or ethical questions. And I found that in that sense, we have to deal with the question of hierarchy and democracy, because the main aim of ours is a kind of a democracy, and that there will be no would be no differences in between gender or on the base of gender or age or affiliation or anything. But I think it's quite far from that recent situation in our cultures. So the question about not only sexual harassment but about power abuse is tightly in connection to this democracy question, and how the society could discuss at all these type of questions. And in Hungary, we do have, of course, that years that when Me Too movement began. So we had examples, but afterwards, and not only on artistic field, but would say that for instance on political level too. But afterwards, the question stayed again or went back to the background and gained this victimization that Jane has mentioned, that usually it's easier to lean to the victim, that she or he was the cause of this. Yes, I finished a minute, and I think it's quite important to make a material and research and the results to share. In Hungary, we have this, as everywhere in Europe, we have Amnesty International, which institution is dealing with education on that field. And I just hope that the discussion about questions, mainly about the power abuse, could spread into the community in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I so agree with you that the roots of the problem lie very deep. Certainly, we can spend a long time talking about that, where those roots lie. But we have no one that has asked to speak, which is why I am going to now give you our second contributor prepared today, whose name is Ian Manborde. Am I pronouncing your name right, Ian?
Manborde.
Manborde.
That's fine.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
And Ian is the Equality and Diversity Officer for Equity in the United Kingdom and has spent the last 27 years in the UK trade union movement, lastly involved in workers' and activists' education. And Ian has been connected to the project. And I know you arrived a little late into the meeting, so you have not had the full context, but I think you know the subject quite well. So I would like to invite you to make a few remarks on the topic at hand.
Sure. Thank you very much. And my apologies for lateness. There's always a crisis. And I was in a meeting that I had to be in, so my apologies to Marie and everybody else. Can I first of all say thanks to Marie and other colleagues at Shift for inviting Equity to be involved in the research. It's a really good opportunity for us at Equity to share our experience at a European level. For those who may not know, Equity is the UK trade union for creative workers across the entertainment industry. So our members are primarily actors in theatre, film and TV, but they're also choreographers, lighting and set designers, jugglers, musicians, singers, street entertainers, festival workers. So that's 50,000 workers and
You're freezing a little bit, Ian. Is he freezing for everybody else?
Yes.
Yes.
Aww.
Do
you hear me, Ian?
I do. Yes. Can you hear me?
No. Yeah, try without camera. Let's see how it goes. It's a nice photo that you have there. Oh. Please go ahead. Please go ahead, Ian.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yes, we hear you well.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, we understand that the issues around sexual harassment are deeply, but for Equity, they're also very much.
You are still breaking up. I'm sorry to say, Ian, you're still breaking up.
Priorities in the UK.
Is there anything you can do with your internet connection?
Wednesday. Yes.
The cause of labor is the hope of the world, it says on the photo of Ian. Well, let's hope we will catch him again. This is the live of the Zoom room. And while we wait for that and ask...
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. I'm joining you via my phone because for some reason my laptop isn't working. So my apologies for that. So I'll make up for lost time. It was really good to be invited to be involved in the research by Marie and other colleagues at Shift. I think they've done an excellent job in bringing together a very clear sense of the Me Too movement in the cultural sector for a European level. So let me just say a little bit about equity. So we're the UK trade union for creative workers, 50,000 actors and performers and other cultural workers and 5,000 students. I think as other colleagues have said in the presentation, we do understand that sexual harassment is very deeply rooted in issues of gender and sex and masculinity and misogyny in society. But as a trade union, what we also understood was that abusive behaviour is very much rooted in the politics of a sector that's predicated on insecure work and low pay. The abuse happens because workers are desperate to work. There are few opportunities to work and they are susceptible to abuse. So before I talk about some of the specific issues that relate to sexual harassment, I think it's just very important to underline that our priorities have been placed on improving pay and improving the conditions of work, particularly around improving the conditions of work for carers, for those who have small children, overall improving the sector as an employer. So it's really important to stress that unless we eradicate issues like poverty, pain, insecure work, we don't believe that we will be able to address the overall abusive nature of the sector. As some illustrations of the work that we've done, we've placed a significant emphasis working with our sister union, SAG-AFTRA in America, on intimacy direction and intimacy coordination on stage and screen. So we've supported the development of this new role across the entertainment industry, particularly in terms of developing guidance for production companies on where intimacy coordination and direction should be used. And we've also introduced new standards into our collective agreements with producers as well. So we've basically raised the levels of awareness of good production techniques where members may have been exposed to abusive behavior because they're involved in scenes that involve simulated sex or nudity. The other development that we've been involved in, and it relates to a point made by the speaker just before me, is around improving levels of management knowledge and understanding of good practice that relates to eradicating abusive behaviour. We've worked extensively to improve workplace policy on addressing discrimination and abuse across the entertainment industry. So we've made a demand of employers that they adopt policy that relates to addressing the culture of abusive behaviour.
Can I ask what you have achieved? Have they obeyed you? How far have you reached?
I would say that how far we've reached is we've seen a reduction in the number of cases being reported to the union. We've seen an increase in the levels of confidence of women to report cases to the union. We've seen an increase in the willingness of employers to adopt policy and make change. So, for example, at the beginning of this year, Sky have agreed to introduce safeguarding officers into the production team. That models Netflix. Netflix were already leading the field in having safeguarding officers as part of the team. So in answer to that question, what have we achieved? We've raised the level of understanding and consciousness. We've forced employers to understand that they have a primary duty of care towards those workers. There is still far to go. So one thing I would say, one thing I would say though, that's a really important development in the UK is the government has now agreed to amend the law around sexual harassment. Previously, employers needed only to have a policy that sat on a shelf. They didn't need to have evidence of actively developing a culture that tackled abusive behaviour. The government agreed in June to amend the UK Equality Act to turn that into what we call a positive duty, which basically means from next year, employers will have to evidence that they are not only having policy, but they're applying policy also. They'll need to have the evidence of working proactively and consciously to address abusive behaviour within the workplace as well. That is a major change to get this government to understand that they need to change statutes to eradicate abusive behaviour from the workplace is phenomenal. That was the pressure, not just of Equity, but other trade unions in the UK. So we have come a long way since 2017, and there is still a lot to be done. But I think what Shift have done in terms of this piece of research and bringing together a good comprehensive understanding of what's happening at the European level is also valuable. And I'll stop
Thank you
there.
so much, Ian. But I would like to thank you so much for sharing with me. But I would like to ask you, have you been working with your European colleagues, similar organizations in other European countries on this matter?
Yes, through our global union federation, the International Federation of Actors, has done a really good job, very much like the Shift initiative, bringing together partners from across the European Union. So, for example, on tomorrow, I'm speaking at, as part of a FIA initiative with colleagues from Norway and Finland, for example, on where our good practice is. So very much like I've just kind of summarized. So yeah, we've been extensively working collaboratively. As this research has done, just to share good practice, I think one thing as well that FIA has done very well through their work is enable different groups of workers to speak to one another. So rather than just officials of the union, actually bringing groups of workers together, whether live performance, film or TV or festivals, to basically share their experience. So yes, we've been working quite extensively at European level.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us all, Ian. And on that note, I would like to inform you all that European networks, ITM, Culture Action Europe, and others have been in the past year and a half working on and pressuring the European Parliament and the European institutions of creating a pan-European framework for working conditions of artists. And this is a hugely important topic, and we have gained weight with the European Parliament and somewhat within the Commission that we would be seeing the light of a pan-European framework which would have the weight to pressure in a considerable way national parliaments regarding working conditions of artists, and as part of that, abuse and harassment would certainly be included. So this is something that has been happening, and I don't know whether Jeremy or somebody else from the IATM team can share some links in the chat to some of the work that us networks have been doing. But we are now half an hour to go, and I would like to focus the dialogue a little bit towards the transnational cooperation. And there is the third takeaway of the first key findings, that stronger transnational cooperation could help the European art sector as a whole to combat sexual harassment and power abuse. And this is something that is in particularly important for us cultural networks that are working across borders, and something that should be a main point on our agenda now. And to start maybe a little bit and get us started, and hopefully we will get questions and remarks from all of you guys. I know there's a lot of people in the room with a lot of knowledge on the matter. We have, for example, 2 former presidents of IATM in the room, just to name 2 of you, as well as all the other culture networks are present here. So please do not hesitate to ask for the word. We would really like to hear your view on this matter. But to start it off, ignite this a little bit, Marta, if I can ask you to recap a little bit, you know, what is it that us networks should do? What is it that we could do across borders? If there's a will, if there's resources, and if there is pressure on us to do it, what should we do?
Thanks so much, Elsa. Indeed, during the research and mainly during the interviews, many times there was an issue addressed by our interlocutors of a need, especially for the ones who are just starting the work, especially in this part of Europe where we are so sort of at the beginning of, we're still negotiating the procedures. We will put them into practice just in a second. But we need to start somewhere. And we did in many cases, but in most of them, what has been shared with us is that the main, let's say, instigating point was to get an inspiration from somewhere else where the discussion already happened, or maybe not to have some code of conduct that has been already created somewhere and copy paste it, because that's usually not possible because of the legal structures, because of the administrative issues. But what is really needed is to learn on a very sometimes personal human level, how did the process go, to understand, for instance, okay, how much time might be needed, or what kind of alliances we might build to make it happen. And I guess this is what the transnational solidarity might bring. And very often what we have heard was the need to actually have not only a database with the already existing documents, definitely that's one thing, but the other would be to have a time and space to meet and share the experience. For instance, the ombudspersons that work in Belgium, that also work they're employed in different educational institutions in the Belgian performing arts field. From time to time, they do meet with each other, with other ombudspersons working in other institutions, and sometimes just simply share their own experiences, or exchange the way how they addressed this or that particular case without mentioning the details, without going through it thoroughly, but just to understand better, for instance, what trap we might meet on the way, what kind of solutions we might need in order to go further and to overcome them, what kind of the alliances might help us to go and to address the issue if, for instance, the context does not welcome it so much, if, for instance, the public debate doesn't seem to stop the victimization for some time. So in that sense, I guess what could be an interesting opportunity or an interesting point to think about is indeed what Marie mentioned, a kind of retreat, a common retreat, a kind of meeting space where people involved in the transformational process, where people addressing the transgressive behaviors, sexual harassment, power abuse, could meet and exchange their experiences in order also to support each other, and also in order also to kind of strengthen their individual paths and their own work, because sometimes it's just not possible to get that strength and that support from your own local milieu because of many reasons. And in that sense, probably in some cases, without this kind of transnational support, the case would not be addressed, or it would just end up as Sarah Ahmed often says, in a graveyard of complaints, and would not come out. So in order to let the complaints spill, to let them be addressed, I think we just need to understand we are many, and also solidarity, transnational solidarity could, I guess, help a lot in understanding and shifting the perspective, that because very often when the case is being addressed, there is this concern that maybe it's just a singular story, right? Maybe it's my fault, your fault, maybe it's just one particular context that made it possible. But usually it's not. It's the mechanism, it's deeply embedded in the culture and in the social structure mechanism that allows it. So I guess a space to build alliances and express solidarity could help us understand they're not individual cases, and that we are many.
And networks can certainly do their part in this regard. And I'm sure those of us that are behind SIF will be, but we need more. We need the institutions behind us, because as you chose to call this project, you three researchers, from call outs to structural change, we want to move away from the singular cases to look at the actual structures that are in our way and the changes, the actual larger changes that need to be made. But I have Maria Hansen, the director of ILIA from the Netherlands, one of SIF's partners, that would like to come in. Please go, Maria.
Hello to everyone, and thank you for this very important session. We are, I think what we have found, and I think several of our board representatives have contributed quite heavily also to this research in the interviews, that leaders of, in our case, that's higher arts education institutions, are really happy to share the knowledge that they have in terms of policy that has been established. And I think as networks, we can provide a space where that sharing can happen, and perhaps even a space where that conversation can continue. We jointly with IATM did an event last year at our biennial conference where we started this conversation and already saw that those that had policy established, often triggered by experiences that triggered them establishing better policy, were incredibly happy to share. And I think that's one way to ensure that processes are put in place and policies in place that also gives leaders a more solid ground to work on, because as leadership, it's incredibly complex to deal with these situations, even if you're not personally involved. And I know that that's part of the interviews that you took. So I think there's a big role for networks to ensure that this sharing can happen, and thereby knowledge can improve constantly.
Thank you, Maria. And I second that. There's a lot that we can do as networks to enable that conversation. It certainly starts with the conversation. And this example that you mentioned from last year, this little small seminar that we did in November, certainly was an instigator for more things that came afterwards. So it very often starts with the conversation. Next up, we have a lively chat room happening, is Virve Sutinen from Tanzim August in Germany.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, I am in Helsinki, Finland, so greetings from the north. I just wanted to pay attention that scanning through the participants, I'm really shocked that there's so few men in this discussion. I'm deeply insulted by it. I think it's a really pity that our male colleagues don't find this discussion important to take the hour to discuss this. Because in most of the cases, the power in our sector is still dominantly in the men's hands, and they are not participating into this discussion. So I first wanted to, unfortunately, say something disappointing.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, but then I just wanted to also, like, I try to remind myself of like how these changes are so slow to happen, and how I feel like we are falling back, and we're going forward and we're falling back, and then it's like you're pushing this thing, and you know, having been there for such a long time, I'm kind of like maybe paying more attention to the power relations, that how those are still marked as male. And I think what happened in IETM, maybe also you and I are part of the change, that when there became more women, it pushed men out of the network, and it somehow didn't feel as important. I think in '96, when we were in Paris, this discussion would have been led by at least 3 French men and 2 Belgian men, and you know, it would give us a different weight at that point. So I wonder what we have to do to reach out for our male colleagues, because we cannot solve this together. How many retreats or discussions we do. But I have one point also about these kind of like how these things happen in everyday work. You know, there's the policies, and we can have ethic rules, and we can have like rules and rules, but if the ethos of our work doesn't change, it doesn't matter how many rules we are and how many boxes we tick. And in that sense, we all have this responsibility. And I think in the end, I have come to the conclusion that you have to be aware of your accountability in every decision making, and to be alert all the time, being alert to know that we haven't won this battle, if you want to call it a battle, that we are still in the middle of it, and it feels like every time we lose our grip, we are somehow falling back, which is kind of a horrible thing after you think you have like being a flaming feminist for a lifetime, and you feel like, okay, we still are struggling with the same things. But I wonder if one thing that could also, you know, we need to change the organization, but maybe one thing I find kind of rewarding for myself is to be there for the younger generation, to coach them one-on-one. So along with the policy recommendation, maybe there could be this kind of network of like, you know, volunteers to who you could call and who you could discuss to share and empower on one-on-one level, because these sometimes the tiredness that you were describing in the beginning, the exhaustion of this work, we all feel it. Sometimes it's maybe nice to see that, also to work, to talk to colleagues, maybe different generations who say, yeah, well, things are moving, but it's slow. You know, from that Paris meeting, we are in a much more equal place today, and we are also much more stronger because we are holding people accountable. This was not possible 10, 15 years. You couldn't really call out for important artists or directors for their misconduct. But I think people feel more and more stronger now that they can do that. And this is a huge change. And this is the change of the ethos, not the rules and the policy points. But this is more of like the whole big cultural change happening, that we feel that we have the right to call out for people, and that there is consequences. So I'm not calling for punishments, and I don't want to be like this kind of public roads. But I think there is. I'm not quite sure if we can re-educate those who who are enjoying extreme privilege in their powerful positions. And they often go from one powerful position to another, no matter what the consequences have been in one place. They seem to move to another place. So yeah, I just want to offer myself also to something like that, to be there for others, to discuss in a small scale, to the support and help this tiredness maybe.
Thank you, Virve. A lot of ideas, a lot of food for thought. Maybe we can start another butterfly effect network around gender and power relations. Just want to tell you, you got a lot of support in the chat room regarding the absence of men, but I still want to thank the men that are in the room. Thank you for being with us. But I did notice this at the beginning of the session. Next up is Ruth Jacobi, Secretary General, or one of two Secretary Generals of the European Music Council, who is also the lead network of Shift.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me? I'm joining from my phone. I'm sorry, so I hope the connection is good enough. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this very important session. As you said, coordinating the SHIFT project, I would like to mention that we are also, of course, obviously working on other themes than sexual harassment and power relations, and maybe we can take examples also from those other themes that we are working on, with coming back to the question what networks can do and what networks can offer. I think it has been mentioned many times, awareness raising, policy making is a very, very important role that we need to take on as networks here. And of course, we obviously also have to look at our own activities. We are not theaters, we are not institutions, of course. We are much smaller organizations and maybe with less strong power relations, but still we have our teams, we have our boards, we are organizing events, we are working with freelancers, and we have our own cases of power abuse, all of us. So we need to look in our own roles. And talking about an example, as the SHIFT partners know, for the package on climate issues and climate action, we are working on a certificate which is led by our partner Elia. Maria Hansen has just spoken before me, and Marie has mentioned it at the very beginning. We might need some external pressure. It has been mentioned that when it is requested for funding, to have some kind of a code of conduct with regards to power relations, we might be more active, and I think we can also create this external pressure for ourselves, like we are trying to do this in the field of climate, to create our own certificate, because the situation of networks is different than for maybe those codes of conducts that are already out there. We could join together and create something ourselves that can then be transferable for other networks, and try to get this kind of certificate and self-assessment running to improve ourselves and to increase our awareness raising and the support to others. I'm just throwing in this as an idea. Obviously, we will not be able to put this in place within the project period of SHIFT, and I'm also not volunteering here and now from EMC to take a lead in this, but it would be interesting maybe to hear others' opinions on that idea, and yeah, that's why I'm just sharing this thought here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruth. Yet another idea, perhaps a little bit larger than the one-on-one coaching, which I think is something that we could actually decide to do. We could create a Google Sheet and have a sign up in a simple manner, and see how it goes. Did I detect, Johan, that you wanted to say something? As one of the few men in the room?
Yeah, as a few men, and not representing them, which is also important to say. Like, I'm not representing any gender in particular, but as a contributor to this particular work package and to the research and the...
Maybe introduce yourself a little bit so that...
Yeah. And the annotated bibliography, I can say share a few thoughts also. So I'm leading FACE, one of the partner organization of this EU funded project, and working on this work package and on the big literature covering these topics, I can say that I mean, gender-based violence go beyond this male-female thing, and there are a lot of other gender fluid, other communities that are not identified under this label, and they also go through harassment, bullying, power abuse, etc. And this is also something we saw when researching inclusion and access in the cultural field, that there are a lot of intersectionality in terms of inclusion, equity, equality, and many of these issues. So one of my thought that I'm sharing is, if we go for certification or for demanding funders and politicians and decision makers to have a clear standard in terms of the ethics and work practice in our field, we should be inclusive in that process and include also many communities that are also bullied, harassed, and excluded, and victims of power abuse. And it's interesting because Marie and Marta mentioned many codes of conducts, handbooks, many literature that exist on gender equality, on power abuse, harassment, and violence. And most of them include men in this. So you have many literature that includes men that are also victims of bullying, harassment, etc. So I think I'm not representing anybody, but just putting this on the table too, and saying that just as Virve, the first thing I watched is the list of participants and seen many female around the table, and I was a bit pissed, but I guess it's very often the case. So let's change that.
Yes, let's work on it before Lyon, at least. And thank you, Johan, for these words. I think I can say that in the work that we have been doing, we have been aware of not using the female-male connotations. So I hope we have achieved that. This is certainly true, although probably the majority everywhere of victims of the Me Too or power abuse in the art sector are women. I think I'm allowed to say that. It does not change the fact that there's a whole lot of males and people that identify with other genders that are as well. We are now coming towards the end of this session, but before we say goodbye, I would like to give the word to Marta and Marie to tell you a little bit about what's ahead and how you can contribute to this project in whichever way you want. So over to you, ladies.
Thank you very much, Alza, and thank you very much for this very rich conversation. I will be very short and practical. So we are, because also of time, I am sharing in the chat. I could see already, thanks for that many of you shared like some campaign initiative report, like the Speak Up report. So please, for any type of feedback that you may have, or maybe conversation that you would like to have, also more on a one-to-one basis, please feel free to contact us, and I am sharing the email address here. I also would like to say, so as you understood, we are also finalizing these reports. There will be also, because the task is quite huge, so we are bringing also two more person in the research phase and in the writing. So my colleague Katika Hedji-Watts, who is in charge of publication and research at On the Move, and also Anna Majewska, who is a performing arts curator and researcher from Poland. So we are making our best also, like to trying our best to finalize this report for the meeting in Lyon. And I don't know for you, Marta, and I will pass you the word, but one of the key takeaway I am taking from on top of our takeaway from this conversation, it's very much this question also of knowledge building, and not only the question of sharing experience, sharing resource, but how to build our own knowledge on the question, on how to deal with the situation, on how even to locate where we are. There is a very interesting comment from Dalia. She say freelance based between Lithuania and Berlin, just saying, I'm just quoting you, Dalia, I hope you don't mind, but the comment was sent to everybody. From my freelancer perspective, the most important is to find a way on how to share the knowledge about the topic, but also how to teach to recognize power abuse, which is based on gender, cultural background, etc. Rules and policies are important, but in an intercultural society, we will not be able to recognize our power position. We will not be able to move forward. So this very much need also of capacity building, I would say, and also knowledge building. So this was maybe, I mean, for me, and we will discuss about that later with Marta, Katie, and Anna, but maybe also something to delve a bit more into the finalization of the report. I pass the word to you, Marta.
Thanks so much, Marie, and thank you everyone for this extremely inspiring and very rich conversation. Maybe indeed what I'm taking with me, and I want to thank you all very much for, is this understanding of probably this kind of two contexts in which the problem of transgressive behavior, gender-based violence is rooted. One would be the cultural context, of course, but the other is, and here I'm also referring to Ian and the work of equity, is that the cultural context has very often, as we all know, its material representation. And sometimes we might feel overwhelmed by the term, cultural context, what does it mean, how to grasp it, where to start to change it. And then if we think about some very concrete material kind of representations of that context, meaning exactly the financial remuneration or the social protection of the cultural workers, here we are, or looking around who is in the room, who is not, and why. These are very, I guess, concrete, graspable, tangible areas in where we can start. And so what I'm taking with me is this understanding, or a need to understand, to always translate the observations into very concrete, tangible, sometimes super small steps. But as we all said, or as also Jasna mentioned, they might sometimes seem banal, obvious, but they are not if they are not practiced every day. And probably the reason why we are all here is that they are not practicing every day. So this is what I would take with me. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. And thank you all for your being here today. Thank you for your generous contributions. I think 2 points that I am going to take and have as part of my goodbye words is exactly what Marta finished with: the value of making it part of your everyday practice. I don't think we can say that enough. This is something that we need to get to. This is the steps we need to take, all of us, whoever we are, wherever we are, from the smallest organizations to the largest, to the networks. We have to make consideration for abuse of every kind, but in this case, sexual harassment and power abuse between genders, a thing that we are aware every single day. And the other thing that I'd like to say, the reason why networks like ours exist and have existed, like in the case of ITM now for 40 years, is that we have been able to transfer knowledge between generations, between colleagues, from one peer to the other. And we have been able to develop and stay fresh and stay relevant on the basis of that transfer of knowledge. So there is no other role more important for network than this. So I think the takeaway for us network is that we really need to step up our game in this regard. We have been doing that through these SHIFT projects, and I certainly hope that we will continue on this journey. And with that said, again, thank you so much for being with us today. Take care, and I hope to see some of you in Lyon and in other events in the coming months and years. Thank you.